you really truly commit to investing more in that one thing, that mission, then what do you need to let go of in your current life to make more room for that? This is the price. Giving something up is the price of gaining something better. Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Beck.
And I am Christine Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors. Hello Dr. Humans, Christine here from Editing World, and I have a confession to make. So we tried a new software to record the podcast. We'd heard wonderful things about this software. It was supposed to be the best thing since sliced bread in the podcasting, recording world. It made a lot of promises. It did not live up to. I don't know why, but it sounds like I'm underwater. So just in case you were wondering what on earth happened to the audio, but after the episode 65 and episode 66, we'll be back to our usual sound quality. So thank you for bearing with us through the technical issues. We hope you still get a lot out of the podcast. And without further ado, let's jump into today's episode.
Hello, my beautiful friends and our Dr. Humans. Welcome back to another potty and another episode in our New Year's series, because we are dedicated to making sure you guys are set up to have an amazing year in 2025. And an amazing year is not just about, the fun and the pleasure and the joys and the celebrations, but we know for people like you who listen to our podcast, an amazing year is also having a year where you are progressing towards your goals. For a lot of us, we get so much satisfaction, and it's important for us to move towards mastery, holding ourselves in the world and making investments for ourselves in the world that have us feeling this sense of progress and exploring our potential. So we want to help you guys set your New Year's goals in a really productive but also personally aligned way, because, we talk about on the podcast about how challenging our clinician conditioning, which sets up this really strong sense of what's normal for a doctor and what the expectations and obligations are for us in our lives. But we want to make sure that your hard work in your life, and specifically your hard work and effort in 2025, is going towards something that actually is fulfilling for you, that actually creates a meaningful, enjoyable life that you're really proud of. So before you set your specific, tangible, smart goals, or however you're setting your action steps up for 2025, we want you guys to take a step back and set your goals from a place of strategy. And here we want to use a bit of an analogy of how if you were a company that had all of these resources at their disposal, how they would decide to use their resources with a goal in mind, with 2025 ahead of them. And that is first thinking about your mission, the company's mission, right? What you're actually trying to achieve. And also importantly, you'll find that a company also has values, because we're not happy to just achieve this goal in any way. Right? We want to achieve it within a certain set of values for ourselves, the things that are acceptable and not acceptable for us, the sacrifices that we're willing to make and that we're not willing to make. And finally, on that note, we also want to prompt you with a question about resource allocation, which is probably, I think, the trickiest, the stickiest question of it all. So find that one at the very end of the podcast if you stay to the end. And Christine is going to kick us off with the very first question. This is going to take you guys 5 to 10 minutes to answer these questions, but they're going to change the other goals that you set, and therefore 2025 to come.
That analogy of thinking of things like a business or a company, it gives so much autonomy, right? Doesn't it? It makes you feel so in the driving seat and in control. So our first question for you guys is, what is your mission for 2025? And when you're thinking about answering this question, we're thinking about that big picture goal. If you could choose just one thing, now of course you might end up adding to this list, but today we want you just to pick
your one thing, like your overarching, bigger picture goal. What do you want to achieve for yourself this year? Maybe for yourself, maybe for your family, whatever it is, but just what is the one thing? But can you think of some examples of the one thing? Like what's coming up for you?
I think about this question for my business, for example. And last year, my one thing was really my group coaching program for doctors. That was the thing that I wanted to make sure I invested, that I had my whole sort of, if we take this analogy, my whole company, all my employees on board with investing into and making the priority. Then I think about, relationships. I can think about if I had a one most important thing in my life in relationships. And I can think about, for example, being a more loving, positive influence in just the day-to-day interactions I have. You have those moments where you walk past your partner in the house, for example, and you can choose to sort of not interact, or you can choose to just place your hand on their shoulder or something as you walk by. Then you can think about, maybe you want your focus to be on your health in your life. And so maybe your one thing is taking more time to rest. If you guys listened to the last podcast, one of the challenges that I had in my life last year was, one of the goals that I had was I wanted to spend a specific amount of time working so that didn't encroach on my other time in my life or all my other things, which was my relationship and my health and my clinical work and da. So you could set a goal that's to do a mission. You could have a mission for the year that's to do with your health that might be resting, or it might, on the other hand, be exerting yourself more. Maybe you want to do more exercise, add more movement or something like that in. But the idea is you have to challenge yourself to pick a priority. You have to focus your company and all their resources on the mission, because imagine if your company didn't have a set mission, a set agreed alignment with what is most important to us this year. Imagine how scattered the energy and the resources amongst all those people would be. And imagine how difficult it would be to make decisions at a time where there are all these beautiful, wonderful options available to you with whatever you could do this week as it happens. But when you have that mission clear in your mind at the start of the year, then when those opportunities and decisions and challenges present themselves, you can come back to, what is our mission this year? What is most important? What are we committed to making progress on this year? So I love setting a mission for that reason.
I love that. I absolutely love just having that mission. And I think the other thing about missions, although we're sort of saying they might go into one of those buckets, like the work, life, health, relationships, they might go into a bucket of some sort. We are really challenging you today to pick one bucket that's going to be the most important bucket for you this year. And you have to make sure you run it through your filter. This is what you're going to do for the rest of the year, is like, you get an opportunity from somewhere and you're like, right, great opportunity. Does that align with a mission? This is going to be a filter for success as well. This is going to be like a game changer for how you set boundaries and how you show up for yourself and for your mission. So it's very important to choose. Obviously, the other parts of your life will continue to happen, but if you know what your mission is, it will be very easy to set boundaries going forward. Which brings us to our next point, which is about our values and our word for the year. Beck, tell us more about this.
Yeah, because there are lots of ways to achieve a mission. You set a goal to, let's just make the goal to exercise more. But if your mission for the year is to exercise more, and in that process you end up being mean to yourself, or you end up abandoning certain other priorities, or you become this kind of person who is particularly rigid or something like that, then the goals, suddenly the mission, even though it's specifically something that is important and meaningful to you, it can come at a cost that's not actually worth it to you. So the values that you set, the values that a company has, really informs how a company goes about achieving the mission, which also informs you what is not acceptable behavior in terms of achieving that mission. Like in the hospital, our mission might be to improve the health of our community, but it's not acceptable for us to do that in a way that, staff are being bullied or staff are being overworked, for example. So what Christine and I like to do with this, and we would highly encourage you to do this too, is have a bit of a brainstorm and then challenge yourself to narrow down to picking one word for the year. This word for the year can kind of inform your value set. And actually, I've got this great example from the podcast. We set a sort of a value set for the podcast in terms of, it's not an easy mission to put a podcast out every week in both Christine and my lives. And we set some values for ourselves when we went about this goal too. So Christine, tell us a little bit about our word of the podcast, which is a great example of sort of how you guys might want to set a word of the year.
It's cheating a little bit because it's a little phrase, but it's let it be easy. And I feel like we added in fun later in the year. But yeah, so it's actually, we're cheating a little bit for the podcast, let it be easy. But that was really just something that we set early on to get out of our own way. Because if we let it be hard or perfectionistic or whatever else horrible words come up, it was never going to happen. So we had to allow ourselves to show up imperfectly, a little bit messy, and just kind of let go. And I think we continue to do that. We have technical issues or whatever, and we just have to laugh and get on with it. And we continue to hold that intentionality for the podcast with that little phrase. And I think as well, in terms of our personal goals, having one word is an absolute game changer. So last year, I actually set my word as impact. And when I set that word, and it was very aligned with my values in terms of how I wanted to, impact other people's lives, make other people's lives better, help them to achieve their potential. That would be how I would translate it for myself. And I thought it meant something. I thought it meant having like a big audience or something like that. But as I went through the year and that word came with me, what I realized is that I was having an impact very much on a one-to-one basis. That was where I was having the most impact. So it wasn't about the number, it was about the, quality over quantity. But the word was with me, and it was delightful to sort of say, even though it looked different from what I thought, I was so happy that I was showing up in my values. And out of everything, in the last episode, we talked about how maybe we didn't quite bring our whole vision board to life, and we set some big goals that we didn't achieve. But if I could ask myself, did I achieve my one word for the year? Did I show up in my values? Yes, I did. And I think the reason for that is because I had chosen the word in the first place, and it was just with me. It's so easy to sort of, like we mentioned just before, it's almost like you show up with that filter. Like life is okay as long as you're showing up in your values, and sort of success is defined by whether you're achieving that word. And yeah, what about you, Beck? How did you go with your word last year?
Well, I'm just thinking about how, you talk about how this word came with you over the year. And I do agree that just spending a bit of time resting your attention on and thinking about that word at the start of the year makes a big difference. But I also know that what you did and what we do, with our sort of value, one of our values for the podcast is we use that to ask questions as the year goes on. We're like, we're charging towards our mission. We've got our goal, we've got our priority for the year, what's most important for us to achieve. And then when we have some kind of fork in the road moment, or when we have competing opportunities come up, this is when you can bring your value in and be like, okay, well, if it was easy, what would it look like? If I was to make the most impact in this moment, then what would I choose? So it really helps you to, there are lots of ways to, the phrase that just came to mind was skin a cat. Oh, that's just awful. There's lots of ways to peel an apple. There's so many ways to peel an apple, guys. And having your value set there for you can help you to peel the apple in the way that is most aligned and enjoyable to you.
It sounds so wrong.
So that's I just think it's a really useful tool for us to bring forwards into the year. It's use your value set, as Christine's saying. The mission is a filter for both of these are filters and questions for you to prompt yourself with. What should I be doing with my time today? What should I be prioritizing this week? These two things, your mission and your values, really help you to make great decisions that keep you aligned with what you want to achieve for 2025. And on that note, as we make these decisions about what we will do, Christine, tell us about give us a third question that makes me cringe a little bit, because I just find this so hard.
Well, our third question, our third and final question, now that we have our mission and our values sorted out, we've brainstormed them, you've written them down, you've committed to the one thing in each of those categories. Once you have that, you then move on to your logistics, your resource allocation, we call it. So if you had this company with this mission, this value set, how are you actually going to go forward and achieve that? And what you have to do is really realistically look at this and say, what needs to go? This is the hard part, because we're all doing lots of different things. We have a million other commitments, and we need to make space for this goal to happen. So unless you already have that existing space, and you're going to be using this, dedicated block of time that you already have, which, I mean, how lucky you are. Unless that's you and that sounds very spacious, we're very, very envious, then a bit like Beck and I, then you might need to be thinking about, actually, how am I going to make space for that? And often that means that something has to go. And when we think about what's going here, we've talked about time, but it might be, your resources mean a lot of different things. So it's sort of like your time, your energy, other resources like your finances maybe might come in here. So it can mean a lot of different things. And the things that you might want to think about are, I guess, coming from personal experience over the years, is like, have you got things that you're showing up for that don't feel aligned? Like you're meeting up with friends that you've had for a long time, but you've lost touch with how much you have in common, or and there's nothing actually wrong, but just it doesn't feel right anymore. You're maybe not getting as much out of it, or maybe things have changed in the relationship. And maybe it's no longer a good use of your time. People grow and people change. Maybe there's something like that that's coming up for you. Maybe, you really want to do this creative thing, but you're working full time as a clinician. That's such a common thing. Whilst it's possible to have a side hustle and stack it on, I guess, would it be possible to cut down? Or is there something that you're doing with your time, like hobbies or classes, that maybe you could cut back on? And I say that not from I think that obviously we need to prioritize having a full life and having hobbies and interests. But from personal experience, I actually did this with my singing. I was a singer songwriter, and I got to the stage where I was like doing 3-hour shows in bars, and to me that was like massive vision board success. But I had sat down and done this meeting with myself one year, and I clearly saw that my attention was diverted. I was everywhere, and I was going to rehearsals and singing lessons and guitar lessons and, oh my goodness, the lessons and all the things. And it was just this massive time sink. And whilst it did bring me joy, I felt like I was personally, there's a lot of people who can sing and do a beautiful job and do it even so much better than I can, let's be honest. But there was this other unique thing that I had that I wanted to bring to life in medical education. And again, there's probably people that can also do that very well. So, but to me, that feels like my unique contribution. And so I had to make this decision. And maybe you could say, oh, you didn't have to make that decision. But I know for a fact, when I made that decision and I decided to focus on my one thing, I achieved like exponential, incredible things the first year that I decided to do that. So I'd still sing for myself in my house whenever I get the time, but I'm not doing that intense, like trying to become Taylor Swift thing. And that was such a good move for my bigger picture goals. But it was a sacrifice, and sacrifices have to be made. And I'm super keen to hear, Beck, from your perspective, this resource allocation and letting things go. What does that mean to you, and what's your experience with it?
Yeah, just hearing your story and hearing, when you say people could say, well, you can do it all. You can do it all. I just want, if you're hearing that in your mind and you've done question 1, you've done question 2, and you're like, question 3, I don't have to give anything up. I'm just going to make it fit. I really want you to do yourself the justice of not accepting that answer. Because if you keep everything the same as last year, if you don't let anything go from what you did in 2024, then you will get the same results as 2024. And this question's really about, having that mission and that value set up there in front of you, specifically having that mission up there in front of you and deciding, hey, taking the bold step of being like, this is my priority. We cannot have everything. On the other hand, or the reciprocal of that is if we take specific periods of time to wholeheartedly dedicate ourselves to particular certain things, we can make massive progress. If you really truly commit to investing more in that one thing, that mission, then what do you need to let go of in your current life to make more room for that? What needs to be sacrificed? If you're going to become a person, to Christine's point, friendships that you might have outgrown, maybe those friendships that you've outgrown are totally acceptable in your current life with your current mission. But if you look at your 2025 mission, and that is to be someone who is, for example, fully dedicated to their music, or, for example, more present and invested in their family, then with that contrast, you might be able to see, if I'm going to give more to those places, that I need to release something from other places. And actually not only the time, but also the energy that goes into these friendships is now a lower priority. If I had to get rid of something, I'd get rid of those. So that's really what this question is about. Be really suspicious of your mind and expect your mind to be like, no, don't need to give anything up because it's scary. But you want to do the scary thing. This is the price. Giving something up is the price of gaining something better for yourself.
Even if you choose not to do that, if you choose to keep it all going, that's actually okay, because that's something that you'll learn from, and it might be a way to figure out what needs to give. So sometimes just that living through that experience, that was certainly my experience. I was trying to do all the things and I was making extremely slow progress in all the things. And maybe you are a unicorn. I actually want you to be a unicorn. I would love to have all the things, but I feel like sometimes you do have to make the inverted commas mistake of going through trying to juggle it all, and you'll get clarity in that process. So I certainly wouldn't discourage you from trying to do it all as well, just for a short time. And also, I guess the other thing to say on the flip side of that is, if you're worried about letting something go, maybe have a compartment of time, like say for the next 3 months, for the next 6 months, I'm going to do this. So you're not saying to yourself, I'll never do that again, ever. You're not putting it into the forever box, but you're allowing yourself to go through a phase of time where you're going to behave a certain way, cut some things out, and then you probably have a bit of a life audit at that time point that you've agreed with yourself, and then you can decide, are you happier? Did you miss it? What was the effect of it? I think that's also very important. Kind of trial and error is okay here as we work on our resource allocation.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that it actually reflects how we use this concept too, because Christine and I tend to change the answer to question 2, our values, each year. Our missions generally stay about the same, and that might be the same case for you, although the little specifics of it might change a little bit. But our missions, like what we're trying to achieve in our lives, for a lot of us is often the same over a 5 to 10 year period. But as you actually work towards that goal and attempt to make changes and take action towards that goal, you're going to learn so much about yourself and what is acceptable to you and what's not acceptable to you. And with that, you bring those values in to help keep you aligned while you're charging towards that mission. And I think as we ask you these 3 questions, these are such great questions to guide you in 2025. And as Christine was saying, they're not forever. These are really impactful questions to help focus and guide you for the year to come. And don't be afraid of committing to them, knowing that in 2026 or even another time in 2025, you can revise them. But if you don't commit, if you don't go all in, if you don't focus, then you're not as likely to make as much progress as compared to if you just have scattered attention.
So just to recap, the 3 things that you have to write down and commit to are your mission, your bigger picture goals, your values, which is your word for the year. You only get 1 of each, and then your resource allocation. So we wish you all the best with that list, and definitely let us know in the comments below what you came up with. We would love to hear your word for the year, especially. I would love to hear that, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.
I've been waiting all my life for something. darkest roads and up in the clouds.